All right, and we're live, and I'm joined today by Antidem. How you doing?
Hey, hanging in there. What's up, my niggas?
Yep. And let me just make sure this is going live, sounding okay. All righty, sounds good. All right,
And we've got something awesome on this channel today.
so yeah, we're gonna ramble on a little bit today about Channel Awesome and all those. A pair of us just in the past day or so watched the Mr. Matoker video on Doug Walker, and if you haven't seen that, you definitely should give it a watch. He's not even trying to be funny in it. He's just giving us a primer on Doug Walker before he starts to rip into some of the more ridiculous people.
Yeah, like he was saying, that's the normal part.
Yeah.
That's the prelude.
So before I get into that, I want to do a quick update on the Daddy 05 situation. Now, if you listen to my channel regularly, you know what's going on with that. But just in case you didn't, it's some white trash fucking couple down in Maryland made a big old YouTube channel about tormenting their poor fucking children, the youngest two in particular. And for whatever reason, this had 750,000 fucking subscribers before it finally blew up outside of its fan base, and everyone said, "What the hell?" And this has gotten all kinds of coverage all over the place. Well, some most likely good news today. It seems the two youngest that were catching the real blunt of everything in these videos, that I mean, just really heinous treatment of these two poor kids, Cody and I don't know what the little girl's name was off the top of my head, but they actually are from a different mother, a previous marriage or whatever, or relationship these days, I guess. They're not that big fat cow's children, which I assume means that the oldest kids aren't the guy's children, but whatever. Anyways, the two youngest that were catching the worst of this, they are now in the custody of their birth mother, which is almost certainly a good thing. There is some question of the birth mother's capabilities. She apparently has some mental problems, bipolar or something. But I have to imagine this is a step up for them. So that's some good news.
Yeah, normally I don't unironically say "Oy vey, shut it down," but "Oy vey, shut it down."
Yeah, shut it the hell down. So that's some good news. Because I mean, everyone's screaming like Child Protective Services has to step in, and I just was thinking like, it's not like the foster care system is a particularly nice place to be. So, that might be a lateral move at best. But getting these kids in with their birth mother is it's probably for the best. It's almost certainly a step up.
And for a lot of these channels, it's not sure, it's not certain how much is scripted and how much isn't. Like with Jackass, with Bam Margera, like constantly pulling pranks on Phil and all that, and a couple other channels, it's pretty obvious that it's at least to some degree scripted. Everybody's expecting this and all that. I'm not sure that was the case with this.
And plus, I mean, scripted or not, I mean, those are adults. This is a little kid, and it's just, as I said, the emotional abuse I saw heaped on this poor kid. Just being treated like Meg from Family Guy, like he's just not part of the family. I mean, you could make the argument, okay, they started this channel and the whole thing got really popular. Next thing you know, they have to keep amplifying. You can excuse away a lot of what was going on there that was ugly, but not that.
Yeah, I mean, if I want to read a Dickens novel, I'll read an actual Dickens novel. I won't turn on YouTube to see it.
Yeah, that poor kid. But apparently he's in a better situation, and and I mean, this is, this guy is, he's public enemy number one. I mean, It's amazing in these divisive times. I think we can all agree that Daddy O5 is a piece of shit. So
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised he hasn't got his ass beat in the street yet.
yeah, I mean, there's nobody is taking his side. This.
And that's going to be one of those ass beatings where, like, it'll happen in a crowd of 100 people and nobody will have seen anything.
We'll just walk up to him afterwards. It's just a prank, bro. Okay, so before we move on to the channel awesome stuff, you had something you wanted to talk about the wall?
Yeah, speaking of Oy vey, shut it down. So the other big piece of news is the Republican Congress passing a budget that doesn't include funding for the wall, and doing it where if this budget is not approved by Friday, there's going to be a government shutdown. So they're basically holding Trump hostage with this idea of a government shutdown. Now, here's another case where I unironically say, oy vey, shut it down.
Yes, Trump absolutely should do that.
Because here's the thing. Ever since that 1995 government shutdown, the Republicans have been just absolutely panicked about a government shutdown, right? Like we cannot possibly have this. But, there's a couple of things to that. First, you got to remember at the time, the face of the Democrats was Bill Clinton at the height of his charm. And the face of the Republicans was Newt Gingrich, who, don't get me wrong, I like Newt. He's an extremely smart guy, but he just does not have the natural charm of someone like Bill Clinton. Whereas now, the Republican president's Donald Trump, and the head of the Democrats is Nancy Pelosi. I mean, who's more charming there?
Oh, well, yeah.
And not only that, let's not forget, 95, that was pretty much the last hurrah of the ability of the Democrats and the mainstream media to have an absolute stranglehold on what public opinion said about things. This was even
pre-Fox News.
That was 95. I think Drudge Report came online in like 97. And that was really sort of the beginning of the alternative media. So, it's a totally different situation. And the Republican Party in these days being terrified of a government shutdown because, 22 years ago, Bill Clinton and the mainstream media, who were completely unchallenged at that time, were able to turn the anger of the public against the Republicans for that. That's just not going to hold now.
Wasn't there a shutdown a couple years ago, at least for like a little bit, and then it really didn't negatively affect the Republicans at all?
There was one during like the later days of the Bush years that went for like
just a couple of years ago.
There might have been another one a couple of years ago, but I remember there was one, 06, 07, somewhere in there, and it really didn't make W's numbers go down at all. Now his numbers were going down anyway because that was the point where like nobody could possibly defend the Iraq War anymore.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and government shutdowns don't negatively affect almost anybody. Nobody's going to care.
In all honesty, and I think a lot of people would agree with this, if the entire federal government just shut down completely and forever tomorrow and just packed up and went away, my life wouldn't be any worse. Be real honest with you.
The other thing I remember a few years ago when like people in the right-wing media towards the end of Obama's terms were finally talking about impeachment. And I remember hearing like, oh, that would affect him so negatively. And I remember thinking like, they impeached Bill Clinton and in the next election cycle got control of even more of the House and Senate and the presidency. So I'm not seeing the logic that this affected them negatively.
It's like they never learned from their failures, but they never learned from their successes either.
Oh yeah, you'd think the Republicans were the minority the way they're eating shit from the Democrats right now.
And by the way, so Chuck Schumer said that the border wall is going to be ineffective, and Dianne Feinstein said that it's going to be cruel. Can someone explain to me how it can be both ineffective and cruel? Doesn't it have to be effective in order to be cruel? Like, if we build it and it doesn't work, how is it going to be cruel?
The Democrats they're just fucking filth. Build the wall and we ought to decorate it with their skulls because you want it to look nice.
Hey, speaking of which, I'm going through the entire Bible, beginning to end, cover to cover, as an audiobook during my commute, because I have about depending on traffic, 45-minute to an hour commute to work. And I tell you, I'm in Second Samuel right now, and anyone who hasn't actually read the Bible or audiobooked it, you really should. It's pretty amazing. And yeah, I we could get Old Testament on these jokers, and it wouldn't bother me a bit.
I I I have long ago, or not long ago, but in the last couple of years, I've reached the point of I no longer have any moral obligation to acknowledge inherent rights of Democrats and communists.
Yeah, honestly, I'm sorry. No. That's what Stefan Molyneux said. He said, ethics isn't a guideline, ethics is a relationship. If you've got two people who are both willing to be ethical with each other, to tell each other the truth, to deal with each other in good faith, then yeah, you can be ethical with them. But being ethical with someone who isn't dealing in good faith, who won't tell you the truth, will backstab you the second that they have the ability to, that's not being good or decent. That's just being a sucker.
Yeah, I would no sooner trust these people in negotiations than I would ISIS. All right, they're modern leftism, much like ISIS. It's a death cult. All right, and you can't expect to negotiate with people that are in a basically de facto state of war with you. You might as well open up peace talks with the Borg.
Did you see that article that they just really arrested this woman FBI translator because she was dating a guy who was actually in ISIS, and she knew it, and she was passing him information?
Because of course she was.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on to some lighter topics. And before I do that, I'm going to real quick get the advertiser out of the way, because I never know how long I'm going to stay on for the little weekday shows. So advertiser is Reconnaissance Man by Aaron Clarey. You go check this book out on Amazon. It's available in digital format, physical format, or audiobook. And it's basically, I guess the best way to put it is it's about halfway between Enjoy the Decline and Worthless in its subject matter. It's basically saying, if you're at a crossroads, maybe you're a high school graduate, hey, maybe like me, you've just been recently laid off. This is a good book to sit down and take stock of, your life, where you want to go, how you want to get there. So
and I remember, as the great Yogi Berra said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it.
Yep. And also down below, you'll see the tip jar where if you appreciate the program, you can send a few shekels my way. And that's greatly appreciated on my part. Tips of any size, be it $1 or some significantly higher amount, is greatly appreciated. That helps me keep doing what I'm doing. And in my current situation, it's particularly helpful. So, there you go. All right.
And go ahead and stop by my website, http://antidem.wordpress.com. And I have a tip button too, but I'm especially looking for cryptocurrency. So if you have a little Bitcoin, Litecoin, Monero, Dash, whatever you want to send my way, I would greatly appreciate it.
I should have gotten into Bitcoin when it was cheaper.
And me too.
A buddy of mine talked me out of it too. And I constantly look at him like, you, damn it, you. But my own fault, I shouldn't have listened.
In my defense, the thing that I've been buying this last little bit instead of Bitcoin has been guns before California gets around to banning them. And, that way, if they ever do get around to banning them, I can just, have a tragic boating accident. There's a lot of those around this state.
All right.
And in New York and Maryland, too.
Moving on. So Mr. Matoker finally started, and by the way, he hates the fact that he's become a whore and he does Patreon now, but I love it because it keeps him making videos regularly. And Jim, you are doing the Lord's work with your videos, whether you're too humble to accept that or not.
And by the way, his last video before this one about Channel Awesome was actually about Daddy 05.
Yes, and I would not have even, I'm not sure I would have even at least let me put it that way. That's what brought it to my attention. Maybe Pat the NES Punk even talked about it, so maybe I eventually would have caught it before that. But I don't watch a lot of the normie YouTubers. Like Philip DeFranco, I had never really watched before that. Although I have subscribed now because I do think he's a pretty solid middle of the road channel. But I wasn't familiar with that before he started doing it. And yeah, he brought that to my attention. I think he brought that to the attention of a lot of people who maybe don't, maybe prefer a bit more esoteric YouTubers. But yeah, he does. I mean, Jim does actual journalism. I know it's a novel concept these days, and that's been true of him since, the days of Gamergate. But anyways, he did a video where he started his Channel Awesome series, and he's going to look at a specific creator each time. This time he looked at Doug Walker, the rise and fall, really, of Doug Walker.
And starting with him because he's kind of, as much as there are flaws in him, and we'll talk about those, he's still the island of normalcy in all of this.
Oh yeah, Doug Walker is Doug's a pretty talented man. He's just, as Jim pointed out in this video, he's not all that happy with what he's necessarily talented doing. Doug Walker tries to do a lot of things that he's not all that good at. But, and as much as, Nostalgia Critic is what introduced me to him, my actual favorite series of Doug's, and this is probably just because I have such a soft spot for the old classic games, is that series he did called Video Game Confessionals, where he plays like a bartender in like a video game bar.
I actually really like that.
He talks about like the stories that video game characters tell him when they come in. He'll sit there and he'll sketch stuff on like a piece of paper, like illustrating somewhat what's going on in it. And he's a pretty good illustrator. He's he's a solid little cartoonist. And those are great videos. I wish he'd have done more of those, but maybe he just ran out of ideas on them. Who knows?
I like those. I liked Bum Reviews. I thought those were pretty good.
What began to really kill this site, and I mean, he was moving away from it beforehand, but he finally killed off Nostalgia Critic. Now, in my opinion, and I said this even at the time, this was a mistake for one big reason. If you didn't want to do Nostalgia Critic anymore, then just kind of put it on the shelf. Look at James Rolfe. He doesn't do nearly as many Angry Video Game Nerds episodes now. He basically does one when he gets an idea. Because here's what happened to Doug Walker, and you could see this. And it wasn't just that the site was going down. I guarantee you this happened to him. He was like, I am burned out on Nostalgia Critic. I don't want to do it anymore. I killed off the character. And you know what I bet you happened to him? I bet you a month later, if that, he thought of a really good episode. You know what I mean? And it just kept popping back in. Because the few that he did right when he came back were pretty solid.
Okay, here's a couple of things about that. First, you have to be honest with yourself about what you're good at. And this can often be kind of a disappointment because a lot of times in life, first you find out that something that you love isn't something that you're necessarily any good at, but you also find that something that you have a natural talent for is something that you don't like. And I think that kind of happened to Doug Walker. He's good at sort of short form, rapid fire comedy, which is what he was doing in Nostalgia Critic. It's what he was doing in Chester A. Bum. It was what he was doing in Video Game Confessions. But long form skit type, man, those skits are bad. Oh man, are they bad. So, I mean, I started watching Nostalgia Critic maybe about 2008, 09. And I left right at the point that Mr. Mediker was talking about, which is about 2012, 2013, because the videos just started getting bogged down with these awful skits. And here's, going back to what you were talking about, here's what I would have done if I was Doug Walker, is say, okay, everybody, I've been doing a Nostalgia Critic a week for 4 or 5 years. At some point, all of the low-hanging fruit of 80s and 90s nostalgia is just gone. So keeping up that rate of production was just never going to happen. So like you said, say, all right, Nostalgia Critic isn't going to be every single week anymore, but it's going to be whenever I come up with a good idea, whenever something strikes me, maybe about one every month or two-ish. Say that and keep doing Chester A. Bomb and keep doing Video Game Confessions, but don't just completely do a 180, and especially don't do it with something that you're not sure anyone is going to like.
Oh yeah, it's fine to try new things. Like demo reel is a perfect example. I think demo reels sucked, but also when I step back, I bet you at least part of the reason people were so negative towards demo reel is because they were getting that instead of Nostalgia Critic.
Exactly.
Now, if you would have just said, look, I'm going to slow down on the Nostalgia Critic thing because I don't want to burn the thing out. Plus, there's other things I want to try. That would have been different. And maybe people would have been a bit warmer towards demo reel. I don't think so. But again, it doesn't hurt to try.
And it would have kept them coming back to the channel. Because at least they'd be, every few days, they'd be going, I wonder if there's a new Nostalgia Critic now.
Yeah. And then, let's say demo reel fails, but then he tries something else and you check that out, people would have given that a shot. And people still wanted him to succeed at that point, as evidenced by the fact that when he did that crowdfunding for that game show, he wanted 50,000 and got 90,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
People still wanted him to succeed. And what he did with that 90,000 turned out to be absolutely shameful. But
he wouldn't need to have nicked it for personal expenses if he still had income coming in from Nostalgia Critic. What it kind of reminds me of is there was a point before Clint Eastwood retired where he really, sort of from the late 80s into the early 2000s, where he really wanted to do more art house kind of movies. But, the studio didn't want to give him any money for them. So he basically made a deal with them where it's like, yeah, okay, I'll go back and do more Dirty Harry movies or, more action films. That's fine. But basically, as part of my compensation, you guys are going to bankroll me making a movie like Bird. That's what you do, is if you want to strike out into something new and do something you haven't tried before, that makes it even more important to keep the stuff that's going to keep people coming back around. And you know what? Maybe at some point, demo reel would have found its legs. I don't think so, but maybe. But the problem is, if everyone gets in their mind that they hate it because they're getting it instead of Nostalgia Critic, how do you come back from that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a perfect. And then, of course, the other thing that hurt that channel, and this, I don't know if this was Doug's fault or how much you can pin the blame on this. But simply put, the people he hired turned out to be reprehensible shitheads.
Okay, here's the thing. Where we're talking about knowing what you're good at and what you're not, one thing that Doug is not good at is long-form comedy. The other thing that he's not good at is being a boss.
Here's some of the things. Like, look, okay, well, let's take Lindsay Ellis and Todd in the Shadows, which the name even sounds cucky in hindsight. Todd in the watching chair. But that's a perfect example of two of the most vocal liberal shitheads on that channel.
Well,
if I was in charge of something like that, we're all just trying to have a good time. I at a certain point, I got to lay down the law with people, and I say, look, I don't care what your political opinions are, but you're not going to be a shithead to the fans about it. You're not going to block everybody that offers the most mild bit of criticism to you on Twitter. I would even go so far as to start policing how people under my channel can act on their personal, well, I shouldn't say personal, but on their Twitters and Facebooks for their characters and all. Like, look, you are not going to go around insulting my customers, is what it boils down to.
Right. And this was happening right when people were kind of leaving anyway. And if you want to take your remaining audience and tell statistically half of them, we hate you, fuck off, well, what's going to happen to your numbers?
Yeah. I mean,
And, SJWs and dysfunction go together like chocolate and peanut butter. So, we that shouldn't be a surprise to us. But like I said, Doug's not good at picking people to be on his channel. He's not good at reining them in when they go to excess, and he's not good at firing them, which are three things you've got to do at a boss. And yes, look, I've done this. I know it sucks. I hate having to do things like this with people, but it's part of what you got to do. And if you can't do it, hire somebody who will.
And by all accounts, people there were fired for things they probably shouldn't have been fired for, and not fired for things like the story. I mean, if you take what she says at face value of how Lupa, and because of that, Phalis left the channel. I mean, Lupa sounds like she was very mistreated. Now, again, that's only her side of it, but it just seems to fit with everything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you notice a certain pattern of behavior.
It's a certain pattern of just unprofessionalism all across the board.
And that's, the problem with Doug is I think he had something that to him was a hobby turn into a profession. And he never got to that point where he was like, okay, now I have to have some professionalism to this. Which, every big YouTuber or blogger or whatever, any e-celebrity who comes up out of absolutely nothing, at some point, you kind of got to do.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand if you don't know what you're doing in that regard, but seek out people you trust that do. Seek out advice. And it's someone who he hired staggered me. I will never forget this because, the criticism that was being lobbed at them and all the, they couldn't go anywhere near YouTube at the time because Blip was still a thing. And, they were getting content IDs every time they tried to be on YouTube. And they would always say, what's fair use? Fair use. And I would tend to agree with them. But the counter argument would be that they're basically just, ripping off other media stuff. And the thing I saw that fed into that argument was unreal. I saw this guy, and it was under whatever Linkara's like sub studio was called, Inked Reality or something like that. It was under Linkara's banner. It was somebody swimming in Linkara's wake who decided to review a series called Spider-Man, which was at the time a crossover between the Spider-Man's or Spider-Man in the Ultimate Universe and the regular Marvel Universe. And this motherfucker basically just read me the comic book and then said, yeah, I liked it. Like, it was so awful in that regard. And I'm like, if Marvel slammed you for a copyright strike, I would 100% agree with them.
Yeah, and
because this was story time with some fat nerd as he read me a comic book.
And there were people who figured out their way around that on YouTube. I mean, there were. So somehow they could have figured something out, including maybe just going to these studios and saying, can we work out some kind of deal? We know we're making money off of this. Okay, Disney, could we give you, I don't know, 5% of whatever we make on this video or something?
Well, I mean, like I said, though, I bring that guy up because that just shows you the lack of quality control. Why was that guy on the channel? Why? I only discovered him because they were promoting him at the top page scroll. Why? There were no doubt so many talented content creators that at the time would have sucked a dick to be on that channel. Why was he there?
You know what it reminds me of? I remember once seeing an interview with Steve Jobs. And what he said was, the hardest part of his job wasn't coming up with great products because he was surrounded by brilliant people who brought him, innovative new stuff all the time. The real hard part of his job, And this was the secret of Apple's success at basically the same time, was being able to turn to absolutely brilliant people who had brought him incredible innovative products and say, no, this isn't good enough. And that's what Doug was never able to do. He may have just even been just too nice a guy to do that. You know, again, if you're someone's boss, you have to develop a little bit of a thick skin, and you have to be a little bit of an asshole sometimes. And I don't think Doug had it in him.
Yeah, I've never gotten an asshole vibe off Doug, and I've gotten it off a lot of the other people off that site.
I mean, even if he just made somebody like Brad Jones his right-hand man, which, hey, there's a really great idea, because Brad's like, for a while, was the only other person on Channel Awesome who was doing anything worth watching. You know, you can see him laying down the law here and there, but...
Yeah, I also don't see him being an absolute asshole like it seems like some of the other guys at Channel Awesome were doing.
No, I don't mean like you have to be able to.
It's a balancing act, you know?
Yeah, you have to be able to lay down the harshness sometimes. And Doug just wasn't ever able to do it. You know, and I even understand having a, you know, okay, we're literally just going to throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. There's nothing wrong with that either. But
when it doesn't stick,
yeah, what do you do?
It doesn't stick, you know? I mean,
you know, there's plenty of content producers who said, I'm going to try something new. You know, we're going to give it a shot, and they've given it a shot and it just didn't catch on. And at some point you just got to pull the plug. You know, you can't just let any old dude do whatever they want on your channel, or, you know, you're just, you know what it's going to be? It's going to be like the video game crash of 1983, where it was brought on by no quality control. There was just so much shovelware out there that everyone said, you know, we're going to go do something else instead. Same thing with Channel Awesome. It's like, yeah, there was always at least something worth watching on Channel Awesome, but at a certain point, it became not worth the effort to take your shovel and dig through for it.
I have not been to that site in years, and I mean, literally years now, and I almost never even click on any sort of Channel Awesome thing on YouTube, even though it's constantly suggested to me, because there are some that, as far as Channel Awesome alumni, I will still watch Lupa, I will still watch Phalis, and I'll still watch Brad Jones. That's it. That's it for me. None of them have struck me as reprehensible shitheads, first of all, because that's part of it. Part of the appeal of these shows was always and will always be a sort of everyman appeal, where it feels like you're listening to your buddy bitch about this or that thing. And that goes out the window when that person reveals themselves to be a shitbag. That's why I can't even go back and watch funny Spoonie videos back when he was funny, because it's like, okay, like I know who and what you are now. So the charm is gone.
Yeah, you know, I still like Angry Joe, but, you know, he's one of the few there who doesn't seem like a total dick. And, you know, that's what you need to do, is develop your stars. Keep them out of the bullpen. It can't be equality. You can't say we're going to push the people who don't catch on because they aren't very good just as much as we're going to push, you know, people who are good and who do bring in numbers.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, I mean, there comes to a certain wisdom where every once in a while you say, you know, maybe this guy would shine if we give him another push. But you don't, again, that's not equality either. That's just every once in a while saying, you know, throwing a bone or something.
And it's also, you know, in the same period when, like you were talking about, people would have done anything to get on Channel Awesome at a certain point. There's so much talent that they never found. You know, I remember watching a video called United States of No from back in like 2009, 10, that was done by Mike Stoklasa, who later went on and did Red Letter Media. why did Channel Awesome not find Red Letter Media when they could have gotten them?
That's a good point. But and then you look at how they are now. I remember maybe it was a year or so ago, could have been a little bit more. Maybe it was even 2 now, when SF Debris was going to be on Channel Awesome now. And I'll never forget this. He went on his Twitter and had to assure his fans that being on Channel Awesome would not negatively affect the quality of his content. Now, what does that say about the Channel Awesome brand?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm almost wondering why you even bother. I guess it's just one other place to distribute your videos, sure. But and maybe they just, it's a little bit more money in the pocket. But that goes to show you that,
Well, there was some movie that some big Hollywood act. Oh, no. It was from Justin to Kelly. Remember that from 10 years ago? And someone actually went up and asked Kelly Clarkson, why did you do that awful movie? And her answer was 2 words, contractually obligated. So, maybe there's some of that involved, but yeah, I mean, there comes a point.
I remember Todd in the Shadows review of that movie, and he's like, hey, I understand having to be in something terrible because you're contractually obligated. And then it just cuts to him in one of those like anniversary movies.
By the way, someone in the chat just said Spoonie's Patreon is down to $739 a month. Is that true?
Oh, I got to bring that up. Hopefully my slow ass internet doesn't. But I want to Google that then, because that's.
Yeah, that's way, even in Arizona, that's way below livable territory. And
Noah Antweiler is creating silly videos, patreon.com. Let's see what comes up here. $739.
Wow.
Holy shit, dude. Like, I'm nobody. I bet you if I threw up a Patreon, I could get at least 100.
Ooh, boy. Yeah. And I bet he didn't save a dime of what he made when he was at his height either.
No, Spoonie is. I'm not even being mean when I say this. This is a honest to God prediction. Spoonie is going to kill himself.
And, again, Mr. Mediker is going to do, one of these creators a month. And when he gets just Spoonie, it's just going to make me sad, because there is someone who legitimately does have talent, who legitimately could be something much more than what he is, but he can't do it. That's the whole story of Channel Awesome. It's just,
I mean, look, he
potential
let fame get to his head and burn him out, but he's also a shithead to a large portions of his fans. I realize that there does come a point when you got to block people, when you got to, you can't just, you can't just be open to everybody. I get it. But no, Spoonie is notorious for, I'm going to get the band hammer out. Well, guess what, Spoonie? After a while of using the band hammer, there's no one left to watch you.
Yeah.
After a while of using the band hammer, you play that card too much. Next thing you know, you're living off $739 a month before taxes.
That's kind of what I said about Mike Anisimov back in the day, which is, if you block everybody, then in the end, the only person you've blocked is yourself.
Yeah. I mean, now don't get me wrong. I'm sure he has other sources of income. I'm sure there's fucking, but I mean, YouTube ad money is less and less these days, as we know. I mean, yeah, he's probably got some merchandise sales, maybe off his site. Maybe there's some random donations or something. So obviously, this is not the only money he has to live off of, but it's probably most of it.
Yeah, and someone in the channel saying, "Got to take the pants." I mean, yeah, I mean, look, for any of you who are familiar with True Capitalist Radio, nobody gets trolled more than Ghost gets trolled, but he gives as good as he gets, and he doesn't ban the trolls because he can give as good as he gets, because he can deflect them and be funny about it and turn it into a positive. Whereas Spoonie just like, I mean, at his core, there must be like some sensitivity or insecurity where he just can't take his considerable sense of humor and fire back with any effectiveness.
Isn't that the great hypocrisy of it? And this goes to a bunch of the other ones too. This goes to this nostalgic cunt, Lindsay Ellis. This goes to Todd in the watching chair. This goes to a great deal of them. For people that make their living criticizing other things, boy, they can't take criticism, and boy, do they get cunty about it. And you know what? Even ones I like, I constantly defend Lupa. I really enjoy her stuff, but I'll never forget the bitchiness of her fucking ad fiasco a few years ago when she was at Channel Awesome. She was running like fucking 4 ad breaks on her videos, and never didn't even have segues into the ad breaks. Like at least Linkara does a we'll be right back thing. These would cut her off mid-sentence. And when people would bitch about that, she'd be like, well, just watch all the ads before the video. You're not entitled to entertainment. And all this bitchiness from her. Like, sweetie, you're not entitled to a fan base. All right?
I hate to say it, but I think the fact that YouTube ad revenue is slowly starting to dry up, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because we kind of had an e-celebrity bubble. And like any bubble, it included a lot of stuff that's worthy and is going to survive the bubble popping, but it also brought a lot of people forward who, they're not that talented. They really don't have any reason for an audience. Their content is not that good, and they should really just go get a day job. And I'm not going to be sorry to see him go.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but when you're trying to just, I mean, look, again, I understand that people will piss you off, and it happens. I've blocked people before. I don't like doing it, but sometimes I just reach a breaking point with somebody, and I'm like, I'm just tired of hearing your shit. And again, I don't like doing it, but it happens. And usually when I block somebody, I end up just unblocking them a little bit later. Like routinely on my Twitter and all, I go through and I basically clean out my block list, which is never more than like 10. But every few months, I'm like, okay, you're out of detention. I get it, but I guess the question there is: are you erring on the side of blocking people, or are you erring on the side of letting people have their say?
What a lot of this reminds me of? It's like you hear some huge number, like 60% or something of people who win the lottery end up going bankrupt within 5 years. And it's because they get a bunch of money and they don't know how to handle it. And, they buy a fancy car and they buy a big house and they don't invest it in anything. And they're shocked at how fast that money can disappear.
Oh, yeah.
And they hand it out to any, distant relative who comes pounding on their door, and in 5 years they're broke. Well, same thing. You've got all of these e-celebrities, and a lot of them, and Channel Awesome's a great example, just don't know how to handle sudden fame. And unlike the Hollywood system where you can say what you want about it, and in a lot of ways it's awful, but at least there you've got an agent and a producer and a studio head who can advise you on things like this. But
I honestly believe, I don't think it's an understatement to say that Spoonie, the Spoonie experiment, the Spoonie persona and its success and then downfall was both the best and worst thing that ever happened to this man. And it has at this point destroyed his life. Because I want you to think for a second. Let's say Noah finally gives up the ghost on this and says, I got to go get me a day job, right? He's going to walk in. Now, first of all, by his own admission, he has a computer science degree where he learned programs that are now obsolete or something like that. But that aside, let's say he just some basic office job that he is at least on some level qualified for. He goes in there, sits down for the interview. Assuming he gets this far, he has a 10-year gap of employment on his resume that he has to fill was something that the baby boomer or possibly older Gen X person behind that desk will not understand. And then when he's like, well, what's going on here? Okay, you could kind of sell this to a guy. You could say, well, look, what happened was I was making kind of goofy videos on the internet, and it took off and it was making me all kinds of money. So I quit my day job. I was doing it for a long time, but it's just sort of run its course. And now I need to get back into the workforce, and I'm ready to get back into the workforce. Okay, fine. You can kind of sell it that way, but the problem is that if I'm that boss, I'm going to be like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. Soon as he leaves that interview, as soon as I get a chance, I'm going to look up what this guy did. And you know what I'm going to find? I'm going to find a strung out looking dude screaming at people while playing a video game at 4 a.m. And I'm not going to hire that guy.
Yeah, I mean,
Spoony is almost unemployable at this point.
Basically, when an employer hires someone, there are two things they're looking for, which are, is this person either qualified for or trainable for this job? And will this person be, decent enough to get along with? Are we going to be able to deal with this person, or 6 months later, are we all going to want to strangle him? Now, let's say PewDiePie lost everything tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. You know what? PewDiePie could probably come back from that, because you look at a PewDiePie video and it's just some goofy guy laughing about stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, you look at a Spoony video and it's like, oh, dude, I don't want anything. This guy is a dumpster fire, and we don't want anything to do.
Yeah, this guy's going to shoot up the office. I mean, that's the impression you're going to get. You're going to see a guy screaming at people at 3 a.m. while playing video games in a basement.
Yeah, and the honest truth is, if Spoony doesn't end up either shooting himself or living in Miles's basement, he's going to end up being, working behind the counter at a GameStop, because that's like the best he's going to be able to do.
Yeah, maybe he'll get assistant manager. And I mean, I don't, on some level, the guy deserves it, but there's also a there but by the grace of God go I thing, where it's like, I feel bad for him. You know what I mean?
Well, it's also, these are the people who took some arrows in this whole new media world. 20, 30 years from now, someone's going to have, people will have a better idea of how to handle e-celeb fame, but like, there's no guide for it now. But you know what there will be is someone who worked for Channel Awesome is going to do a tell-all book.
Oh, I can't wait for that. I'm almost surprised it hasn't. And you get bits and pieces of it here and there, but I wouldn't be surprised if finally Doug just fucking gives up the ghost on the place at some point and just spills the beans.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. With Doug and Nostalgia Critic, you know what it reminds me of is I actually have a theory about George Lucas, which is, my theory is everything that has happened with Star Wars since 1980 is explainable if you start with the idea that George Lucas hates Star Wars. And my theory is, so he finishes American Graffiti. It's a moderate hit. He comes up with this, the space opera that he figures is just going to be, another maybe moderate hit, won't really go anywhere, because nobody thought that Star Wars was going to be the hit that it ended up being, right? Even the studio didn't. The only reason that Star Wars got the release slot it did was the movie that was supposed to be in that slot. It's a movie called Damnation Alley with George Papard and Jan Michael Vincent. And if you haven't ever seen it, look it up on YouTube. I remember seeing it like some night when I was up late sick when I was a kid, and it was playing at like 3 a.m. So they finish Damnation Alley and they're going to release it, but the director decides to send it back for more work on the special effects. They need something for that late May time slot. The only thing they've got is this crazy space movie that George Lucas is working on. They put it in the slot, and it is a monster hit, like just absolutely unexpected. I don't think anyone involved with that movie thought that they would be making a sequel to it. I don't think they thought it would do much business at all. And when it did, all of a sudden you had George Lucas trapped by this, because now the only thing anyone wanted him to do was Star Wars. And I think he thought he would do this little thing, it would be over with, and then he would go on to all the other projects he wanted to do. But because the studio kept wanting more Star Wars and the fans kept wanting more Star Wars, he couldn't ever escape from it. You know, he didn't even direct Empire and Jedi because I just don't think he wanted to. I don't think he was that interested in it. And I think not only was he not interested in it, he hated how it dominated the whole rest of his career. And he never,
I think really, that's what it was. I think,
yeah.
I think he kind of suspected he had something there. That's why he held on to the merchandise rights. But I don't think he could have possibly anticipated that, 30 years later, people would still be obsessed with it for some damn reason.
Oh, yeah. And so I don't think he ever understood why it was a hit. I think he really resented the way that it dominated the whole rest of his career. Because the only other thing he ever did that was of any note was writing the Indiana Jones movies, which he didn't even direct. Other than that, what has George Lucas ever done? What, like the Radioland Murders?
I never even heard of that.
That was a movie he made. Yeah, that was a movie he made like in the late 80s, and like nobody ever went to see because the only Lucas movie they ever wanted to see was Star Wars. So I think not only did he make the prequels not understanding why anyone liked the originals, he didn't really care about them. He saw them only, I think the only reason he made them at all was just as a platform to test CGI because he was really fascinated by it. And that's why the only thing that's going on in those movies is CGI. He didn't care about the actors. He didn't care about the plot. And there's way, way, way too much CGI in it. And I think at this stage in his career, he keeps saying he's going to make other movies. He never does. So it is at least partly his own fault. I mean, he had 10 years between the mid-'80s and the mid-'90s when he could have done more. And yeah, he made Radioland Murders and it never went anywhere, but he could have kept trying. But, he never escaped from it.
Part of the reason he could never get any successes, I mean, he's not that talented. I mean, Star Wars, the movie we saw, the movie that America would see, it's a perfect example of something being made by committee well. George Lucas had a basic idea of something that had potential, and a bunch of people really, really polished it up. But I mean, you could look at his original script for the Star Wars, and it's bad.
Somebody did a comic version of it a couple years ago,
right before Dark Horse lost the rights because it reverted to Marvel, because obviously all that stuff's owned by Disney now, which owns Marvel. Right before Dark Horse lost the rights, the last thing they did, and I almost swear it was really just a fuck you to Star Wars for losing the rights, but they did a comic book adaptation of that script. And you could probably find the trade paperback of it or the individual issues, not that much. And when you read them, keep in mind that I'm sure the people that made that comic book tried to clean it up a bit. But yeah, it's rough.
And I'll note, for example, that the CGI series that was done when Lucas still owned Lucasfilm, the Clone Wars, that's very hit and miss. I mean, it's because Lucas was down there a lot. He was approving or disapproving scripts. He had his daughter down there writing episodes. And the series they've got going on now, Rebels, it is much, much more consistent. It is much more, reliably good. By the way, this also feeds into my theory of Star Wars these days, which is the main stories, the numbered stories, are not very good, but the side stories are good.
Well, that's because the main stories, they were done in 1983. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, like, even episode 7.
The only thing, well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, the main stories were done in 1983. The only thing other Star Wars movies should be is looking at other things in this universe. The prequels would have been interesting if it would have focused more on like side characters and had the Anakin stuff happening in the background. Like this is just this kind of coming storm in the background while you look at more interesting characters.
But I mean, I'll be honest.
And Episode 7, I think, is the single worst Star Wars movie by a wide margin.
This is going to be really controversial, but
I would much rather watch the prequels.
This is going to be really controversial, but honestly, in retrospect, The Phantom Menace isn't as bad as we remember, and in retrospect, Episode 7 is much worse than we remember.
Episode 7 is horrendous.
Yeah,
I mean, look, the prequels are failures, but they're failures because they try.
Yeah, or the way I put it, even an epic fail is still epic.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're in school, an incomplete is worse than an F. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, you might give Phantom Menace or Episode 2 or something an F, but you got to give Episode 7 an incomplete.
Yeah, it's just no. And it was typical J.J. Abrams. I knew it was. It had exactly the same flaws that his Star Trek movies did.
It's funny. Both Star Trek and Star Wars have one thing in common, and that's that they're generally the best when their creators are kept away from it.
Oh, yeah.
It's like both Gene Roddenberry and George Lucas both created really interesting fictional universes that much better writers would do really cool stuff with.
Oh, I was just talking with someone today about Wrath of Khan, and honestly, I would say Wrath of Khan is, I'd put it on a list of greatest movies ever made. I think it's that great. This is a movie that actually managed to get an unironically really great performance out of William Shatner.
But the little things in that movie, like when Spock is off in the corner dying and like the chamber full of radiation and, Kirk's yelling for him and all, when he stands up, he like forces himself to stand up straight and straighten up his uniform. Like he tugs on his uniform. Like that just little character moment there is so poignant.
Oh yeah. That was just an incredible movie. And, other than that, it's hard to find them in Star Trek. Oh, I like Deep 69 as much as anybody else, but, other than that, good moments are really few and far between.
I think the middle seasons of TNG are really good. I think the original series is like half the episodes are really good. Voyager is the one that breaks my heart because I think Voyager has the most potential of all of them and just fails to live up to it almost always.
See, okay,
Voyager on paper had the absolutely most interesting premise of anything I've ever seen in Star Trek, and it just constantly falls on its face.
Yeah, and I've actually seen episodes with Kate Mulgrew where she talks about that. And she says, basically at the time, her personal life was completely falling apart. She was getting divorced. Things were bad with her kids. And she said she just didn't have the energy to go in there and fight to make that series better than it was. And that's one of her great regrets is that she just wasn't able to do that.
Every once in a while it would shine. And when it did, like that episode with the called, what was it called? The Clown or the Thaw. With the like the fear monster inside the computer, that's probably the best episode of the series.
You know what would have been really interesting? Okay, there's an episode called Equinox, and I think it might be a two-parter. Basically, the crew of the Voyager figures out they were not the only starship that got thrown into the singularity and ended up in the Gamma Quadrant. There was another starship called USS Equinox. And basically, while Voyager has stayed sort of ethical and, kept the Prime Directive and all of that, the crew of the Equinox has not. They've been like, we're just going to do whatever we need to do to get home. And they've been doing some really, really unethical things to try and make it. They resolved the whole thing in like one episode with Janeway, blasting the Equinox at the end. What I would have loved to seen was at least one season of like rivalry between the two ships.
Yeah, that could have been a perfect recurring villain. Because if you think about it, the nature of the show, they weren't supposed to have recurring villains. They were supposed to have villains for about a season, and then they've traveled far enough to not be in their territory anymore.
Well, yeah, you could have even made it better than that with sort of having it be this moral ambiguity of like, okay, are the good guys really so clean, and are the bad guys really so dirty? Maybe the bad guys kind of have a point here and there. Maybe the good guys, aren't doing what they should. So
one of the things that always drove me nuts as a Star Trek fan growing up was the way a lot of idiot writers completely did not understand what the Prime Directive was supposed to be about. I mean, the Prime Directive is basically this idea that, hey, when you're zipping around the galaxy, maybe you don't go fuck with cavemen. That's probably a bad idea. That's probably not good for them. Leave them alone. Like, there's that episode of TNG in season 1, and season 1 of TNG is damn near the lowest point of the franchise. But it's that episode where like the penalty for any crime is death, and that's how they're so peaceful. And like Wesley like steps on the grass or something stupid like that, and they're gonna kill him, and they're all like, I don't know if we can stop him because of the Prime Directive. And I'm like, are you fucking retarded? Like, first of all, you are already interacting with these people, okay? You're already interacting with them. Second of all, it's just basic diplomatic immunity. Like, I'm sorry, we'll plant some more grass there. Shut the fuck up. I'm not gonna let you kill this kid. I'm trying to bang his mom.
Well, yeah. Here's the thing. I don't mean to geek out too much on Star Trek, but there's an old quote from G.K. Chesterton, one of the great sort of natural conservatives of the last 100 years, where he said, "You never take down a fence unless you know why it was put up in the first place." The thing about Kirk was he would violate the Prime Directive all the time, but he understood it. He knew why it was there, what it was trying to accomplish. So he understood, knowing why that fence was there, he knew when it was appropriate to take it down.
Exactly. And like I said, the basic idea of it, and it's a good idea, is, don't fuck with you find some sentient race that's just beating rocks together still, leave them alone. Just leave them alone. Don't go down there. You're going to scare the hell out of them. You're gonna mess up their society. You don't go giving a nuke to people still in the Stone Age. It's not going to work out well. That's the basic idea. Is just leave them alone. And it's there for two reasons. It's number one, to try and not be, plundering, to try and not be just, taking advantage of these people, but also for their good. Like, leave them alone. Let them sort their shit out. But it doesn't apply to somebody you're already interacting with. Yeah. Except it does apply to their internal affairs. That's the thing. If they're not a member of the Federation, you're not supposed to interfere in their internal affairs.
Well, like, there was an episode of the original series where there's a murder on the planet that they're visiting, and Scotty gets accused of it. And, Kirk is like, okay, we got to prove that Scotty's innocent, otherwise they're going to kill him. But that's a murder. I mean, if he really did kill this woman, then something has to be done. It's not
it's diplomatic immunity. Diplomatic immunity doesn't extend to a murder. Right. What I mean? Diplomatic immunity is for minor offenses. So yeah, when you're on some it's just basic common sense shit, and it's like that was those bad episodes where it's like, this entire conflict of this story is because everyone is an autistic moron.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. And it's, this kind of ties into a lot of stuff I could say about the Constitution and all of that, which is, and, that's what I think Madison was talking about when he said, this Constitution is, suitable only to rule a moral and religious people. It's not suitable to anyone else, which is, no set of rules can ever really be a substitute for having a brain in your head.
Yes, it's the Constitution is a gentleman's agreement between this government and its people. If the government is full of corrupt assholes or the people are a bunch of savages, it just tends to no longer apply.
Right. And, there's the Talmudic / autistic argument of, well, do you think the Second Amendment applies to having nuclear bombs? Well, if not, then then it doesn't apply and we can take your guns away. Right.
Yeah.
Well, no. Anyone with a brain in their head understands that there are weapons that you shouldn't be able to just go down and buy at the corner store. You shouldn't be able to go down and buy 100 gallons of anthrax or 1,000-pound fragmentation bomb or a nuke or anything like that. Okay, I understand that because I have a brain in my head. But, just like I understand why you shouldn't be allowed to yell fire in a crowded movie theater. But, it's this whole autistic thing of we're going to pick these rules apart and we're going to lawyer them and we're going to hang on this word and that. Our Constitution was not designed to withstand that. Neither was the Prime Directive. Neither was the Bible. Neither is any set of generally good rules.
Yeah, that's what it boils down to. And again, that was, well, the problem, Gene Roddenberry is a fucking creepy autistic, or was, I should say, but was just this creepy autistic fucking gamma male. And again, he created a really interesting structure for a fictional universe that better writers would work with. But season 1 of TNG, much like episode 1 of Star Wars, is that franchise at its most pure in touch with its creator. And that's why they both suck.
That and Star Trek The Motion Picture, which almost killed the franchise there.
That it is remarkable that there was even a franchise after that. Because remember, there was no second TV show or anything at that point. It was, it was just a cult TV show from years ago that we gave a really terrible movie to.
Yeah, well, that's what the studio said, is they were like, okay, we'll do another movie, but we'll give it half the budget, and Gene can't be anywhere close to it. And that's what turned into Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, we're not even going to tell them we're doing it until we're done with it. Yeah, that's what it boils down to. TNG would find its groove. By about season 3, it would have some absolutely brilliant episodes, but season 1 is almost unwatchable.
It's funny. Will Wheaton actually did a podcast for a while where he was going through the season 1 episodes one by one and talking about basically how bad they were and what was going on behind the scenes. And that was before I gave up on Will Wheaton, which everybody, if you haven't given up on Will Wheaton already, give up on Will Wheaton.
Yeah.
But, it was at least interesting to see, a lot of the people involved knew how bad they were too.
Well, there was this one scene, I can't remember exactly what it was, but FF Debris pointed this out, where it was this brief scene where it's like, this is what Will Wheaton's character should have been, where this scene sort of showed that Will Wheaton, Wesley had this innate prodigy element about him, but he comes up with this half of a really brilliant idea that the more seasoned people refine into a better idea that works. That's how that character could have worked. Instead, it was, the precocious super kid magically saves the internet or magically saves the ship while the rest of the crew is, in
all of his brilliance.
Yeah, they're smearing their own shit on the wall because they don't know what to do.
Yeah, that just, it's a series that keeps getting chance after chance after chance. And what happens is every so often it'll do something to redeem itself. By the way, my excuse to feel old back in November was First Contact turning 20.
Oh, geez. So many, the 90s, everything about the 90s slowly turning 20.
What
the past few years has been driving me nuts.
You know what turns 20 this month?
What's that?
Austin Powers.
Oh, geez.
I know.
I just picked up a big art book cheap off Amazon. I found a really good deal on it on Amazon. It's a Mega Man Complete Works it's got all the art from Mega Man and Mega Man X in it, from manuals and stuff like that. And it's the 25th anniversary edition of it too, right? And I found a really good deal on it. And I ordered it a few weeks ago, actually. And I just realized I'm looking at this, and it's a 25th anniversary. Well, Mega Man's actually now 30.
Yeah.
Oh man.
By the way, the
Book's
Gear
5 years
5
old.
to Gear 541 in the chat. Yeah, Wrath of Khan is one of the greatest movies ever made. And notice I didn't say it was the best Star Trek movie ever made. I didn't say it was one of the best sci-fi movies ever made. No, it's one of the greatest movies ever made. And, but in that wonderful, incredible summer of 1982, that also brought us Blade Runner, that brought us E.T., that was quite a summer.
I actually kind of hate E.T.
In retrospect, it's not as great as people
even as a
remember
kid, and I realized, it came out the year before I was born, but as a kid, it's something I watched a lot because everyone's like, it's E.T. Kids love E.T. So, anyone that was babysitting me, as a kid would throw that on or something. I hated that movie.
Could be worse. Could be Mac and Me.
Oh, well, yeah, Mac and Me is pretty bad, but my theory of E.T. is that E.T. was actually like a retard that fell off that species short bus or something like that.
Here's a video on YouTube that you guys should watch to get an idea of E.T. There is somebody on YouTube who posted, that end scene where the ship comes back down and E.T. gets back on it and Elliot says goodbye and all that. It was someone posted a video of that with the only thing that's different is the soundtrack's removed. You would be shocked how boring that scene is without that John Williams score for it.
I can imagine. And that's the other thing. As a kid, I thought that movie was boring as hell. And I mean, yeah, you're a kid, so you're obviously have a shorter attention span. But I don't think I'd be any more entertained as an adult.
Yeah, it was.
I can appreciate the effects for it at the time, and I can appreciate what they were trying to do with it. I just don't think it works.
Me, the summer of '82.
I'd rather watch Willow than E.T. Let me put it that way. I'll take Willow over it any day. That is an unsung classic.
Oh, absolutely. The '80s was full of some great sci-fi, fantasy, action movies. But yeah, E.T. again, it's a movie that's not as good in retrospect as it seemed at the time. Which, by the way, I wonder what's going to happen to these Avatar sequels. Because the thing about James Cameron movies is, it's almost like Chinese food where you're hungry half an hour later. Like you walk out of the theater and you're like, yeah, Avatar, that was great. I love that movie. And then like a month later, you're like, what did I like about that movie?
Yeah, you barely remember you ever saw it. Like, oh yeah, that was a thing.
The last James Cameron movie that I genuinely liked was True Lies, and the last one that I thought was great was Terminator 2.
I love True Lies. That was good. I didn't realize that was James Cameron, but looking back, yeah, that's got his cinematography all over it now that I think about it.
So, when Avatar 2 comes out, is anybody going to notice?
I highly doubt I'll go see it. I mean, honestly, there's not a lot there's not a lot I see in the theaters anymore. I was going to go see the Power Ranger movie, but oddly enough, I could not find anybody that wanted to go see it with me, and I don't like going to the movies by myself.
Yeah, I don't think that's all that odd.
Everybody was like, I don't want to see that, and I'm like, I don't know. I kind of want to see it, and everyone's like, eh.
Yeah, go Power Rangers and just keep on going. I lost interest when they said they stuffed the gay rights message in there somewhere.
Well, everything's got to have a fucking faggot in it now, doesn't it? Just
taste the rainbow.
They should have put a gay guy as the Pink Ranger. Why not?
There you go.
The Rainbow Ranger. There we go.
I was just saying on Facebook, you know what? Actually, I would like to see rebooted, but we'll never get a reboot. Is Dirty Harry?
Yeah, I could see that really working.
Especially, have you seen Clint Eastwood's son? He looks just like him, and he's actually a really good actor. So you could do it not as a reboot, but just as a sequel. It's like, here it is. 30 years after the last Dirty Harry movie, Harry's retired, his son's a detective, blah, 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 blah.
I'd see that, yeah. I like Clint Eastwood. I even like his movies now. I mean, he's somebody that just what was the one he did with Gran Torino? That's an amazing film.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even like westerns all that much, and I like most of Clint Eastwood's westerns.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, I can't stand John Wayne movies. I really cannot stand John Wayne movies, and I will argue this with boomers to the death, but I think John Wayne was a horrible actor. John Wayne talked like he had a stroke. Now, for the longest time, I never understood why, but I actually heard a story where when John Wayne was a youngin' working on Hollywood, one of those fucking cowboys was still alive at the time, right? I can't remember which one, but one of them that John Wayne supposedly looked up to was still alive at the time, and that's how he talked. So John Wayne just decided that's how cowboys talk.
Mm-hmm.
What he didn't realize is, no, that's how an old man who's like got one foot in the grave talks.
Yeah, if you see an interview
talking that way sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, if you see an interview with John Wayne from the time, he doesn't talk like that.
No, but in all the movies, he sounds like he had a stroke. And like the only John Wayne movie I ever enjoyed was I think it was The Shootist, where he was like this old guy and he was, kind of got dragged back into doing stuff and all. And I guess just because him talking like a man who had a stroke finally actually made sense.
I'll stand up for the original True Grit, but I know Blasphemy, the new True Grit's actually a better movie.
It probably is because it doesn't have John Wayne in it. I hate John Wayne. I really cannot. And dude, growing up, my dad fucking loved John Wayne, and I got John Wayne movie damn near shoved down my throat. And they're bad. He's not a good actor. He's just not. Wasn't, I should say.
No, I understand that. There's some stuff from when I was a kid that I can't watch now because I literally watched enough of it before I was 10 for a lifetime, like MASH. When I was growing up in the close suburbs of New York, like Channel 5 in New York ran MASH, I'm not kidding, 4 or 5 times a day. That was before syndication really rose, so you got a lot of reruns. So, I mean, I've seen every single MASH episode ever 1,000 times. And, I'm not crapping on it that much. I'm sure it's a fine classic TV series. It's just I can't ever watch it again.
Yeah, my dad liked MASH a lot too growing up.
Yeah. Hey, remember back when that was it? Oh, here's 2 things about that TV show. As liberal as it was for its time, a man wearing a dress was shown as being a sign of being crazy, and they actually had a Catholic priest character who was sympathetic. When was the last time you saw a Christian priest that was a sympathetic character on TV? Actually, I'll tell you when. Firefly. Oh, by the way, speaking of Joss Whedon, you saw the thing he did on Twitter, right?
Oh, I talked about that Saturday with the making fun of the cancer surviving girls or something. It's first of all, that joke wasn't even funny, Josh, and there's your real sin in my eyes. And you be as dark and edgy as you want, but just be funny about it. But also, yeah, Mr. Feminist is gonna.
Well, he's another one of those guys. Like George Lucas, the truth is that the real genius behind George Lucas was Gary Kurtz, who was his producer, who kept him in line for the original trilogy. Same thing, the real genius behind Joss Whedon is Tim Minear. Everything that Whedon's ever done that's good, like Firefly, has Tim Minear's fingerprints all over it, and everything he's done that sucked doesn't. Same thing with Roddenberry. There was some producer he worked with who actually came up with most of the good ideas. So,
I remember when Buffy first came out. For whatever reason, in my area they would rerun it Saturday afternoon, the new episode. So I would watch season 1, and I remember kind of thinking this is sort of a goofy action show, but it's pretty decent. It's fun. It's a few notches above Hercules and Xena, but it's fun. And then I remember years later hopping into that show just out of curiosity, oh man, I haven't watched this show in years, and it was so up its own ass, and I'm just what the hell happened? Like, people writing this show are taking this premise way too fucking seriously.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. John
And
Steele's in
I
the.
just have to imagine that it's probably like the end. By the time it got all successful, Joss Whedon had way more creative control.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, John Steele's in the chat. He's about my age and grew up in about the same place, so he can remember the time when. Let's see. Channel 5 was the MASH channel. Channel 11 was the Honeymooners channel. And Channel 9 was literally the we'll do anything for $1 channel. Like I mean, it was one shade off of the channel that Weird Al ran in UHF. They would like do the craziest thing. And now it's UPN and they're just normal.
You know what I had in my area before there even was a UPN? I grew up with the Washington, D.C. channels. And I had a channel called Paramount 20, which was just a local channel in D.C. owned by Paramount before they had a national network UPN. They might have had other small affiliates here and there. But, like, I remember Paramount 20 was where all those Star Trek reruns or the new episodes of Next Gen were or whatever. But yeah, I remember like we're launching UPN, and to me it was like that just was a name change to a channel I already had.
And yeah, John Steele's bringing up. Yeah, I remember Channel 11 ran The Odd Couple like 3-4 times a day too. But The Odd Couple, I mean, for some odd reason, I never get tired of The Odd Couple. Like you could just sit me down and watch all of those episodes now, and I'd still like them every bit as much as I ever did. So
there was a reboot of that maybe a year or two ago with Matthew Perry and that one dude who was in like Reno 911, and it was actually pretty funny, like surprisingly so for a modern sitcom. I don't think it made it, but like Matthew Perry was the I can't remember the character's name, but he was the guy that was the sportscaster.
Oscar,
thank you. I was blanking on the name, but yeah, Matthew Perry's a funny dude. It's a shame he doesn't get more work. He's a really good comedic actor. I mean, he basically plays the same smartass character each time, but it works. So,
And by the way, people will say that Seinfeld is like the most New York show that's ever been on the air. No. The Odd Couple is the most New York show that's ever been on the air. Trust me on this.
let's see. We got like way off topic of Channel Awesome.
We did. Channel
what
Awesome.
What does it really say? I mean, other than and there's not a lot of these guys that I still watch anymore, and even broader from Channel Awesome, just these types of guys. I still really enjoy James Roll stuff. I like Pat the NES Punk, although that's a bit different. As far as reviewers, Some Call Me Johnny's really good. But there, and I mentioned earlier, I still watch like Brad Jones and Phalis and Lupa, and they actually, even though like Lupa is under Phalis's studio, I guess, or whatever, and Brad Jones is his own thing, but they still constantly cross over with each other. I guess they're still buddies. I think I'd actually heard Lindsay Ellis went back to Channel Awesome. Like she left it for a while, but like she was running her own site so poorly. It was even like it finally just went down and she never fixed it.
Yeah, this is such a story of dysfunction. And like Mr. Medicare said, for all that we can say about Doug Walker, he was the sane one. Which, the problem is if you're going to be the only sane person there, you've also got to be someone who can lay down the law.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it is there was no adult supervision there.
No. And that sounds like a lot more fun than it actually turns out to be.
Yes, it's fun. It's fun at first, and it quickly goes off the rails. You need somebody in there to rein people in.
And that's what you keep hearing about. Like story after story I hear of like, experimental communities founded in the 60s, or if you look back at the history of Apple Records back when the Beatles first founded it, it's all basically the same story. It started out with no adult supervision. Everyone thought it was going to be great, and it wasn't long until it really wasn't great, which is why adult supervision exists. That does make it better for everybody. In the end, it does.
Well, yeah, there was just somebody around, some sort of father figure, essentially, who could have told everybody no. That site would still be going strong to this day. Pull people aside when they're acting like assholes and just be like, no. I mean, even the Spoonie mess, even how like Spoonie got like kind of kicked off the site. Um, that's a perfect example. If somebody would have been able to step in and say, look, y'all are acting like fucking children, knock it off. You can't be doing this. I mean, yes, and don't get me wrong, Spoonie was being an asshole, and he rapidly, made sure that everybody who was on his side quickly switched. Like he just made it impossible to take his side. But why wasn't there some sort of figure in there who could have pulled Spoonie aside for like a Skype call and just said, dude, you need to chill the fuck out?
And in the end, it would have been better for him.
It would have been better for him. It would have been better for the site. It would have been better for everybody involved. But that's not what happened. They just let things go completely off the fucking rails until somebody said in the chat, you should listen to Lord Cat's podcast about Channel Awesome. I have listened to him. There is quite a bit of butt hurt involved with him, but he's probably about 90% right. But yeah, he has torn into it a lot. And some of these guys are still going to be doing stuff in a few years. I think a few of these guys are still going to keep doing this, but a lot of them, I mean,
again, I think what we're beginning to see now, and that's really going to hit in the next couple of years with some of the demonetization and all that, is especially the YouTube e-celeb, but the e-celeb bubble is going to pop.
Well, yeah, because the way you're going to get money here going forward, you're going to have to seek out small companies that want to advertise. Basically, you're going to have to do what I do on a bigger scale. What do? I get donations from fans, and I get small companies that want to advertise on here. Small people hawking products. And, that makes this that makes this a hobby that makes it me a few bucks. I can't live off of it, but
yeah.
But yeah, you're going to have to your fans are going to have to like you.
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to be somebody who people just have to tune in because they hate them. Because they'll tune in, but they won't send them money.
See, to me, a good example of someone who's going to survive. Now, again, I'm relatively new to the arena of gun ownership, so I've been getting into a lot of gun YouTubers. And there's a guy named Hickok45 who's one of the big gun YouTubers. He's a retired middle school teacher from Tennessee who's just got this home range set up in his backyard. And he's got this wonderful sort of folksy, fatherly delivery, really nice. And he also knows who to advertise for. He's got a deal with Federal Ammo, and he's got a deal with Bud's Gun Shop. Because, that's targeted advertising. That's going to the people who are actually going to be watching his channel. And he does, it's like a product placement. Federal sends him ammo and he shoots it. Bud sends him loaner guns and he shoots them. He even has this one thing where every video he'll have this little target set up and it's autographed by him, and he shoots a bunch of rounds into it, and then he'll go and sell the targets at gun shows. That kind of thing is smart, and that's what's going to survive. Whereas, first, just scattershot advertising isn't going to survive. Second, the era of the angry rant is pretty much over.
You got to be bringing something else to the table than that. I mean,
and
if I was gainfully employed right now, a Patreon I would actually be contributing to would be Gaming Historian. I really like his videos. They're informative. It's covering a top. I mean, you'll get a bunch of people that'll play retro games, but you don't get as many people really looking at the history of the industry the way he does. And he's got it set up perfectly. It feels like mini documentaries, even down to the music he uses at the end, where it sounds like a PBS pledge thing, and he's like funding for and he's got some low key woman's voice doing the announcement where it's like funding for the Gaming Historian is brought to you by Patreon supporters and viewers like you and that kind of crap. Like, that's how you do it. You got to bring something to the table, and you're gonna have to. you know, if you want to make a living at it, you're going to have a good fan base of people that really want to support you.
Mhm.
I mean,
And you
look at
know,
Mr. Matoker. He's already at $3,000+ for a
mhm.
Patreon he didn't even want to do. He doesn't even want to ask for money. You know,
and
where
that
Spoonie's got his measly $739.
and it's knowing your audience too. Again, you know, gun YouTubers is an area that isn't completely saturated, whereas there's a million gaming YouTubers, and you know that market's saturated. Even people who are really good can't make it. You know, you have to be super, and most people aren't. And yeah, in the chat, yes, I do watch Forgotten Weapons too. I watch both Gun Jesus and Gun Grandpa. But you know, that's the thing. Also, you know, with these gun channels, just about everyone who's doing one is either retired from a normal job or has a normal job on the side. You know, Forgotten Weapons works for his gun auction sites. Iraq Veteran 8888 works for that gun shop down in Atlanta. Hickok's retired from
It can
teaching.
definitely be a prison if you let it, the eFame thing. And I mean, that's part of what happened to Spoonie. You know, I mean, I've said before that, you know, if this was making me enough money to live off of, I think I'd still kind of want a day job, because what happens when it's not anymore? You know what I mean?
You know, this kind of reminded me of the last thing I wanted to bring up about this. Anyone who's into sci-fi out there, especially, you know, classic sci-fi, will know who Jerry Purnell is, right? Guy wrote, you know, Lucifer's Hammer and all those books. And he's well into his late 80s now, still writing books, by the way. I remember he's a guest sometimes on Leo Laporte's show. And I remember after the show ended, Leo was just like talking with him on the live stream. And I think it was John C. Dvorak brought up L. Ron Hubbard, because Purnell's actually old enough that he knew L. Ron Hubbard personally. And so Dvorak asked him, you know, well, what was the story with Scientology? And Hubbard said, you know, Purnell said that L. Ron Hubbard ended up in his own weird sort of personal hell, because he founded Scientology because he had originally wanted to write a self-help book, you know, Dianetics, but the government had come after him because he wasn't a qualified psychologist, and he had published this, you know, he wanted to do what basically amounted to unlicensed psychology. So he decided to rebrand the whole thing as a religion so he could hide under the First Amendment, and he figured everybody else would be wise enough to figure this out. But eventually he ended up as the leader of this religion, surrounded by people who actually believed in it when he was their leader, and he knew that it was a bunch of bullshit. And that has to be like the worst kind of hell ever. And there, you know, you've got Doug Walker, who at some point doesn't believe in the Nostalgia Critic anymore. At some point has to stop really believing in the mission of Channel Awesome. And yet, like, he's the captain of this ship that he can't abandon.
Yeah. Or you end up with Spoonie, who, you know, Noah doesn't want to be Spoonie anymore, but there's nothing else Noah can do. And also, he's got to look at it's not even like, I mean, there's certain people that can be trapped in something that's successful that they don't want to do. I mean, you know, Rush Limbaugh would much rather be a sportscaster in his heart of hearts. And he's basically admitted this. But because of the liberal bias in the mainstream media, he'll never be able to do that. He tried, and they chased him away. Meanwhile, we'll let that faggot Keith Olbermann still on ESPN. Mm-hmm. But that's what Rush Limbaugh wants to do at this point. He really just wants to talk about golf and football anymore. That's all he really wants to do. And he can't do it. But at the same time, Rush is very successful with what he is doing. Now, you look at a guy like Spoonie, who's trapped in something he most likely does not want to do anymore, but he's also trapped in a career that he both hates and is slowly dying on him.
Yeah, you know, at least with
he's
Rush,
stuck on a ship that he's not comfortable on, and the ship is also slowly sinking.
Yeah, I think Rush would rather be a sportscaster, but I think he's perfectly satisfied to talk about politics.
Yeah, I'm sure I don't think Rush is miserable, But in his heart of hearts, he doesn't have the one thing he really, really wants right now. But, he then goes and wipes his tears away with $100 bills. So he's fine. Spoonie, on the other hand, wipes his tears away with napkins he stole from the Wendy's that he's using for toilet paper.
Yeah. No, he wipes his tears away with $100 bills, exactly 7 of them a month.
Oh, man. That's before taxes, too.
Yeah, at that level of income, I don't think he's even paying taxes anymore.
I don't know. When you're your own business, they really do tend to screw you over. So who knows? Movie Bob a couple of times complained about how he's basically in debt to the IRS. I'm sure he probably still hasn't dug his way out of it. It was, I guess, last year he said, like, this quarter I owe more money to the IRS than I even have in money.
Yeah, well,
Like,
you would think he would find a connection between liberal politics and high taxes.
Oh yeah, when the tax man fucks a liberal, it's just so delightful, isn't it? All right. Well, I think we've rambled on for a while here. You got any closing thoughts there, Auntie Dim?
Did you get the patch I sent you?
I did, actually. Thank you. I got that just yesterday, or not yesterday, Saturday. Yeah, it was really cool. Auntie Dim sent me a little patch for the back of a backpack or something you put on Velcro, where it's the snake flag, but he's being stepped on. And it says, "I specifically requested the opposite of this."
Yeah, a friend of mine said that pretty much is libertarianism in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's sadly where everything's at.
Or there is another one that it's a snake, and then next to him is a little smaller snake with brown skin, and it says, "Never step on me or my wife's son ever again."
Well, I'll tell you the one that sums up where my politics have moved now, and it's the one where a cobra is wrapped around a grenade, and it says under it, "I swear to God, I will kill us all if you fuck with me." That's about where my politics are. All right. Well, Auntie Dim, thanks for joining me for this. I appreciate you being on here.
Let's do another one as the more channel awesome videos come out.
Oh yeah, I definitely. I'll have you on to talk about this as it goes forward, because this is, it's going to get really funny when it comes to, the one I'm almost kind of going to feel bad about is the Linkara one, because he's going to do Linkara. I'm sure he's going to do it. And here's the thing. You may notice that I never really take shots at Linkara, even though there's a lot on the table to take shots at, because the poor bastard basically had his very questionable browsing history exposed for the world. And I don't know, Linkara just doesn't seem like a reprehensible shithead to me. He seems like a douche, but it's almost in like a thoughtless kind of aspy way. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't really know any better. He's not like really malicious like some of the other fuckers, So I never like to take shots at Linkara, but I'm sure Jim's not going to have those same hang-ups.
And to John Steele and Davis Arini there in the chat, we should do a show on classic TV sometime. We should
throw Aaron Clary in there too, because even though he's a lot younger than you, I swear to God, he's never seen TV that wasn't made after the 60s.
That's not a bad plan. Honestly, if I had kids, I would set a general rule that like any TV show in black and white is probably okay to let them watch.
Oh yeah, I think if I was a parent, I would have nothing but, there'd be no TV. There'd just be approved shows that I let them watch DVDs of.
Yeah, I knew somebody who his daughters, he had 2 daughters, like 6 and 9, and they kept acting up on him. Eventually, he cut the cord on TV, bought a DVD box set of Little House on the Prairie, and he said, like, within 4 or 5 months, his little girls were calling him and his wife Ma and Pa, and were offering to help out with the dishes and do chores. They learn a lot from that.
Well, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I appreciate you being on. Everybody, if you enjoyed the show, do check out the sponsor, Reconnaissance Man by Aaron Clary, available in physical, Kindle, and audiobook formats. And of course, there's the tip jar down below where if you appreciate the show, I appreciate some tips. Tips of any size are, greatly, greatly appreciated. Alrighty, that's all we got for tonight, folks. Thanks for listening. Bechtloff out.